I'm grateful, Mr Deputy Speaker, and I would like to congratulate all honourable and right honourable members who've participated in the debate today, and to thank my honourable friend, the member for Hayes and Harlington, but also to thank the very many groups and individuals who have taken the trouble to lobby their MPs, who've come down to Parliament today and earlier this week. And I want to give a special mention to Jason Roach from the RNIB, from my constituency, who do such sterling work raising issues for the blind and partially sighted, and to Simon Duffy from the Centre for Welfare Reform, and Philip Connolly from Disability Rights UK. You've all done a terrific job, and I think it should be acknowledged the efforts of disability activists and supporters in this campaign, and to collect such a huge number of signatures to secure the debate. I think the dedication shown by members of the public to get this debate brought here in the main chamber before Parliament does indicate the strength of feeling and the widespread concern over the extent of the government's cuts. We are short of time, but in terms of housing, the bedroom tax, in terms of income cuts, the changes brought about by policy, changing RPI to CPI, the social care cuts that were highlighted by my honourable friend and the member for Leicester West, general cuts in public services that directly impact on people with disabilities. People with disabilities tend to use libraries and such public services. They rely on them more heavily. It's ironic today, in my constituency, an organisation called EdPIP, the East Durham Positive Inclusion Partnership, which was a charity, and it was set up some years ago to support some of the most disadvantaged families, is actually closing today. And it's another indicator of the pressure that disabled people, their families and carers are under. And I do think it's a trust issue, Mr Deputy Speaker. I hope the Minister will take note of this, because the Prime Minister pledged that the cuts would be made fairly, and he said those with the broadest shoulders would bear the greatest burden, and that people who were sick, vulnerable and elderly would always be looked after. And despite, we have to remember that the sick and the vulnerable and the disabled weren't responsible for the economic crash, and it does seem that they're bearing the brunt of the economic burden. We've heard from other members about the impacts, the loss of income and services. A disabled person is suffering 9 times more than someone who's not disabled, and those requiring social care, a disabled person, is affected 19 times more. If these cuts had been made fairly, then they would have fallen on the better off. And I think it's in contradiction to the promises that were made by the Prime Minister that it would be those in the greatest need of our help who wouldn't be suffering under austerity. I think it is a measure of the civilisation of any nation, of how well we treat our weakest members in society, and by this standard, I'm afraid the government's failing miserably. Rather than being protected in a time of hardship, the sick and disabled people seem to have been targeted. The services they're relying upon are being attacked from all directions, resulting in greater inequalities, poorer health, and a growing sense of anxiety, fear and trepidation over their future. Cuts haven't been made in a fair way and are not spread evenly across public services or indeed over entitlements. Cuts have been targeted, with over 50% falling in just 2 areas, on benefits and local government, affecting sick and disabled people disproportionately.
My friend, give way.
I'll happily give way to my good and honourable friend.
I'm very grateful, honourable friend, for giving way. And does he, like me, share the massive concern that the company which has been delivering the very flawed, as we've heard today so many times, work capability assessment, has now been given a job by the government of harvesting our health data, the whole population's health data, from your GP practice?
I'm grateful to my honourable friend, and I think that is cause for alarm. It certainly makes me alarmed that Atos, who have been involved in this debacle in relation to the work capability assessments, who have apparently raised concerns of their own and asked to be released from the contract, are apparently being awarded the contract for the collection of highly sensitive care data from GPs, but that's another minister's responsibility, I think. But, you know, as I said, you know, issues around social care for children and adults that make up 60% of all spending over which local authorities have any control. Huge cuts, 40% reduction in local government. It actually spells disaster for local government. And it's got a huge impact on adults and children who depend on vital public services. There's an interesting statistic I came across, Mr Deputy Speaker, that by 2015, by the time of the next general election, £8 billion will have been cut from social care in England. That's about 33% of the total. And last year, 320,000 fewer people received local authority brokered social care compared with 2005. And one of the reasons for that, as my honourable friend alluded to, is the change in the eligibility thresholds that many local authorities have been forced to make. So, as well as being unjust and denying people adequate social care, it has unsustainable consequences. It's a false economy. By removing care in the community, we're putting pressure on other public services, for example, accident emergency, and at the same time, changes to benefits are having an appalling impact on those who rely upon them. Other members have touched upon the consequences of the Independent Living Fund, currently supporting more than 21,000 people with severe disabilities, which is due to be abolished at the end of the year. And indeed, funding cuts are already meaning that in many areas, services for sick and disabled people are reduced to a minimum. I do think, Mr Deputy Speaker, that with such large-scale and rapid changes being made to the services that disabled people depend upon, the government owes it to those who have been affected to have an understanding of what the impacts are. That's why I'm supporting the War on Welfare campaign in calling for the government to commission an independent cumulative impact assessment of the impact of these changes on the system of welfare on the sick, disabled people and their families. We weren't elected to this House to represent and fight for the interests of the powerful and privileged. And without a cumulative impact assessment, this government will be failing in its responsibilities to protect the disabled.
Madeleine Byrne.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker.